Biomed Nexus Daily Updates, your essential biotech, medtech, and pharma recap. No noise, just what matters. TLDR Argenx is buying Forte Biosciences for $2. 2B, picking up a Phase 2 drug for vitiligo and celiac disease and pushing beyond the single blockbuster that made it. Sanofi scrapped amlitelimab, and the framing hardened over the weekend into a 1,4B Kymab bet that has now faltered, an about-face on a drug it once saw as a Dupixent successor. AI-generated data has become a sticking point in biopharma deal-making, as big pharma and AI biotechs argue over where and how the data behind a partnership gets made. Section 232 pharma tariffs hit large companies. Friday, the week's thread, and now 4 days out. New COVID vaccine patent lawsuits added to the tangle of legal fights over the technology behind the shots. Executive takeaway 2 immunology stories landed on opposite sides of the same coin, and together they tell you how hard this business is even for the winners. Argenx, the company that turned the FcRn mechanism into Vyvgart and one of the great recent commercial successes in autoimmune disease, is paying $2B for Forte Biosciences to get a Phase 2 drug for vitiligo and celiac disease. This is the classic move of a single product company trying to become a franchise. Argenx has the commercial infrastructure, the autoimmune expertise, and the balance sheet from Vyvgart, and it is deploying that to buy its next mechanism rather than wait to discover it. Vitiligo and celiac are both large, underserved autoimmune markets, and the deal signals Argenx intends to be a durable immunology company, not a one-drug story. It is the same logic we have watched drive Vertex, Lilly, and the rest of the M&A wave. Use the cash from your winner to buy your way out of single-product risk. The other side of the coin is Sanofi. Over the weekend, the framing around its amlitelimab discontinuation hardened, and it is worth sitting with. Amlitelimab came from Sanofi's 1,4B acquisition of Kymab, and it was meant to be a successor to Dupixent, the mega blockbuster Sanofi shares with Regeneron that faces a patent cliff. Sanofi now says it will not seek approval in atopic dermatitis because the drug would not represent a meaningful improvement over the standard of care. That is a blunt admission, and it turns a pipeline setback into a strategic problem. We flagged Monday that Sanofi's pressure was building across the riliprubart failure, the antitrust probe, and the Genzyme warning letter. The Kymab bet faltering adds the most important piece yet because it hits the post-Dupixent plan directly. Argenx is buying its way into immunology's future. Sanofi is watching a piece of its own future evaporate. Same sector, same week, opposite trajectories. Keep one eye on Friday when the Section 232 tariffs take effect for large companies. That is the week's thread, now 4 days out, and we will pay it off at the end of the week. Read full analysis. M&A and immunology. Argenx is buying its second act. Argenx agreed to acquire Forte Biosciences for $2. 2B, gaining a Phase 2 stage drug for vitiligo and celiac disease, according to Fierce Biotech. Argenx built itself on Vyvgart, its FcRn blocker that became a major success across myasthenia gravis and other autoimmune conditions, and this deal is the clearest sign yet that it wants to be more than a one-product company. Vitiligo, a pigment loss condition with few good treatments, and celiac disease, an autoimmune reaction to gluten with no approved drug therapy at all, are both large markets with real unmet need. Buying a mid-stage asset rather than waiting on internal discovery lets Argenx move faster, using the commercial and scientific muscle it built with Vyvgart to expand its autoimmune franchise. It is a bet that the company's edge in immunology transfers to new mechanisms and new diseases. Clinical Sanofi's $1 4B Kymab bet just faltered, and the post-Dupixent plan took a hit. SNY, the framing around Sanofi's decision to drop amlitelimab hardened over the weekend into a $1 4B Kymab bet that has faltered, according to Biospace. Sanofi said it will not seek approval of the OX40 ligand antibody in atopic dermatitis because it would not represent a meaningful improvement over the standard of care. That is a candid and damaging admission. Amlitelimab came from Sanofi's 2021 acquisition of Kymab, and the company had positioned it as a potential successor to Dupixent, the blockbuster it shares with Regeneron that faces an eventual patent cliff. Losing it in atopic dermatitis, the disease Dupixent built, removes a load-bearing piece of Sanofi's growth plan. As we noted Monday, this lands on top of the riliprubart Phase 3 failure, the EU antitrust investigation, and the FDA warning letter at Genzyme. The pressure on Sanofi to produce a pipeline win is now acute. AI data is becoming a deal-making headache. A biospace analysis found that where and how data gets generated has become a sticking point in partnerships between big pharma and AI biotechs. As drug discovery grows more complex, the question of who owns and controls the data behind an AI collaboration is creating friction in deal negotiations. It is a maturing pain point. For 2 years, the AI drug discovery story was about the promise and the big headline partnerships, from isomorphic to in silico to the Anthropic ecosystem. Now that these collaborations are real and generating value, the parties are fighting over the practical questions that determine who captures that value, chiefly the data. It is a healthy sign that the field is maturing past hype into the harder work of structuring deals that actually hold, and it is a reminder that in AI drug discovery, the data is often the real asset. Quick hits. New COVID vaccine patent lawsuits added to the growing web of legal disputes over the technology behind the shots, a reminder that the mRNA IP fights spawned by the pandemic are far from settled. Insmed strengthened its support for a closely watched pulmonary hypertension drug, reinforcing a program in one of the more competitive cardiopulmonary markets. Zevra Therapeutics plans to ask the EMA to approve Dabu trofinetide in Rett syndrome, following Acadia's path and extending the reach of one of the few treatments for the rare neurodevelopmental disorder. Amgen laid off around 40 employees, a small cut that fits the slowing but not vanished layoff trend we flagged Friday. Coming up, Friday, July 31st, Section 232 pharma tariffs effective for large companies. This week, Q2 earnings continue for big pharma. Late July, BMS KarXT Alzheimer's, Psychosis readout, PTC Sepiapterin, PKU readout, August 2026, Replimune RP1 FDA response. August 22, Capricor Duramiocel, PDUFA, Advisory Committee, pending, read, full analysis Biomed Nexus Pro, Institutional Intelligence Brief Argenx and the One Product Problem, Argenx buying Forte for $2. 2B is a textbook example of a successful, single-product company confronting the risk that defines its category. Understanding the move means understanding that risk. Vyvgart is a genuine success. Argenx turned the FcRn mechanism, which reduces harmful antibodies, into a drug that works across multiple autoimmune diseases, and it built a strong commercial organization around it. But a company whose value rests on one mechanism and one product franchise is exposed. Competition, patent timelines, and the simple concentration of risk all argue for diversification, and the best time to diversify is from a position of strength, which is exactly where Argenx sits now. Forte gives it a new mechanism and 2 new diseases. Vitiligo is a visible, psychologically burdensome pigment disorder where treatment options are limited and patient demand is high. Celiac disease is a large autoimmune condition with no approved drug therapy, only dietary management, which makes it a genuine greenfield if a drug can work. Both fit Argenx's autoimmune expertise, and both are big enough to matter to a company of its size. The bet is that Argenx's edge transfers. Its scientific understanding of autoimmune disease, its trial execution, and its commercial reach were built around FcRn and Vyvgart. Applying them to a different mechanism in different diseases is not automatic, and mid-stage assets carry real clinical risk since phase 2 drugs fail in phase 3 all the time. But the strategic logic is sound. Argenx is using the currency of its success, cash and credibility, to buy optionality before it needs it. If the Forte assets deliver, Argenx becomes a multi-product immunology company. If they fail, it has the balance sheet to absorb the loss and try again. This is what graduating from a one-drug biotech into a durable franchise looks like, and it is the same maturation the whole strong tier of the industry is pursuing through M&A. What is left of Sanofi's post-Dupixent? Plan Sanofi not seeking approval for amlitelimab in atopic dermatitis is more damaging than a typical pipeline cut because of what amlitelimab was supposed to be. Here is the strategic problem laid bare. Dupixent is one of the most successful drugs in the industry, and Sanofi shares it with Regeneron. Like every blockbuster, it faces an eventual patent cliff, and the central strategic question for Sanofi has been what replaces that revenue. Amlitelimab, acquired through the $1.4b Kymab deal, was a designated part of the answer, a next-generation immunology asset that could carry forward in the diseases Dupixent built, starting with atopic dermatitis. Sanofi saying the drug would not meaningfully improve on the standard of care is an admission that this particular piece of the plan does not work. Stack it against the year Sanofi has had. The riliprubart phase 3 failure in CIDP, the EU antitrust investigation over flu vaccine marketing, the FDA warning letter at the Genzyme site in Ireland, and now the Kymab bet faltering on its lead indication. No single item is fatal, but the accumulation raises a real question about whether Sanofi's pipeline can generate the growth to offset the Dupixent cliff on the timeline it needs. What is left? Sanofi still has a broad immunology and rare disease portfolio, a strong vaccines business, and real commercial scale. Amlitelimab may yet have life in other indications beyond atopic dermatitis, but the company needs a clear, convincing pipeline win to reset the narrative, and it needs it before the Dupixent cliff moves from future risk to present reality. For investors, the read is that Sanofi's execution risk has risen and the market's patience has thinned. The rest of 2026 will be judged on whether something in the pipeline steps up. Watch the remaining immunology and rare disease readouts because Sanofi's story now depends on them more than it did a month ago. Why AI data became the battleground. The finding that AI-generated data is now a sticking point in deal-making marks an important maturation in how AI drug discovery partnerships work, and it is worth understanding why the data specifically became the fight. In an AI drug discovery collaboration, value is created in two places: the models that generate hypotheses and design molecules, and the experimental data that trains and validates those models. The AI biotech usually brings the models, but the data often comes from a mix of sources: the pharma partner's proprietary data sets, the biotech's own generated data, and new data produced during the collaboration. Who owns and controls that data determines who can benefit from it in the future, both inside and outside the partnership. That is why it became contentious. Data is durable and reusable in a way a single molecule is not. A pharma company that hands its proprietary data into a collaboration worries about that data improving a model that a competitor might later access. An AI biotech that generates valuable data during a deal wants to retain the right to use it across its platform. These interests conflict, and resolving them is now a central part of structuring these deals. The broader signal is healthy. Fights over data ownership mean the partnerships are real enough and valuable enough to be worth fighting over, which is a step up from the era when the deals were mostly about signaling and optionality. It also means the AI biotechs with the most valuable proprietary data, not just the best models, hold real leverage, because data is the harder asset to replicate. For anyone evaluating this space, the lesson is that data strategy is now as important as model quality, and the companies that control unique, high-quality data sets are the ones best positioned as these collaborations mature. Coming catalysts: Section 232 tariffs hit Friday. Q2 earnings continue this week. Late July brings the KarXT and CPUpterin readouts. The full catalyst calendar returns Friday. Argenx is spending $2.2b to grow beyond its Blockbuster, while Sanofi watches a $1 4b bet fall apart. AI data has become the deal-making battleground, and the tariffs land Friday. What are you watching? Reply to this email. Visit the Pro Hub Read. Full article sponsorship slots for 2026 are limited. See packages and pricing. New Biomed Nexus signals weekly sales intelligence for life sciences BD teams. Learn more